Welcome to the MX podcast featuring Dan Roberts, the female fitness, well-being and holistic lifestyle show that helps you get the mind of an athlete and body of your dreams.
So Johanna, welcome to the MX podcast. How are you doing?
I'm really well. Thanks for having me, Dan.
Oh, my pleasure. So the MX podcast is, just for your information and for people new to listening, is a podcast to help mainly women with their fitness and well-being. And a large part of our well-being nowadays is our relationship with social media. So in the last few weeks, I've been searching for an expert on social media, and I stumbled across you, and we had this wonderful conversation last week. And I'm just so pleased you agreed to come on this podcast because you're full of insights and ideas. And I know the audience listening will take a lot from our conversation today. So thank you.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me, because I love talking about this all day, every day.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. And I think we were all on we all have opinions on social media. So it's, like I said, I really want to sort of delve deep into it and why it became such a big part of your life. I mean, you're actually doing a PhD on Instagram, which is wild.
Yeah,
Tell me about that.
Why would one do that, right? That is correct. So I'm not a full-time researcher. I'm doing this part-time because of university structure in Germany. I don't think that matters to your listeners that much. But so I'm a political scientist, and I, over the past couple of years, have been really interested in, why are people posting photos of their food online, and what does it do to us when a lot of people are doing that? And then there's of course the angle of Cambridge Analytica and election, stuff, election manipulation. And my discipline is a bit jaded when it comes to visual culture, and why would one want to look at that? But to me, it's so interesting, because when you consider that over 1 billion people online are using this device, are communicating their lives through the app, there's got to be something there to look at. And I find it fascinating. The positive side effect of this is every time I scroll, I can always tell myself, oh, it's research.
Good point.
Yeah.
So let's take a step back in terms of social media. How did social media evolve? You seem like the perfect expert to ask about this. What was the first social media platform out there? What was it?
So I think the most well-known would be MySpace. I think that was sort of the first one where we really got into social media. And maybe you remember this too. There was this.
I'm older than you, of course I remember.
There was this, you could configure the page, you could have music on your page and do really cool things like that. And then all of a sudden, Facebook showed up in 2000. It was started in 2004. Started, moving around college campuses around sort of, that time, 2004, 2005. And then from then on, it was just, explosion of social media. And then Twitter got in the game. Instagram actually showed up fairly late in 2000. October 2010 was the first time when they had started working on the app earlier, and they had, as far as I read, made posts to try things out in July of 2010, sort of amongst their own group or within the company. But really the public facing side of it started in October of 2010. And now we're here. It's been, I think what's fascinating about social media especially is that it was exciting, right? You could talk to anyone in the world. I remember when I signed up for Facebook, there was this innocence of people across the world connecting. And all of a sudden I had a connection with someone across the globe from a country I had never been to. And I was like, ooh, what music are they listening to? What's on their mind? What do they want to do? What is their dream, and what's their aspiration in life? It was really innocent. And when you look at Twitter, especially, I think people saw it as a way where they could be honest with the world in a way that's, I think, backfiring on a lot of people now, because we have a permanent record of everything we've ever thought and said online available to everyone, unless we delete it or make sure that we, take steps to ensure privacy. And I think for a while there was, if you remember the Arab revolutions in 2011, there was really a lot of enthusiasm about social media and the role it could take in the world. And then the challenge around it is, I think, well, there are a couple of challenges, but why it is the way it is right now is because at some point these companies actually had to make money because they were funded by investors, and investors love to see growth, but they also love to see monetization and being able to make their money back tenfold, 100-fold, 1,000-fold would of course be ideal. And that's sort of the tipping point we saw with Instagram, for instance, in the mid 2010s when they stopped doing the wonderful chronological feed and then they allowed paid advertisement and really focused on data harvesting for their marketing. And that's sort of, I think, how things really started shifting to this world of social media we have right now that's fairly challenging for a lot of people to navigate because of the mental health fallout. I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but that, I would say that's sort of it in a nutshell. I would say we've been exposed to social media for the past 15 to 17, 18, we could say 20 years if we want to be really generous. So it's been around for a while.
I mean, it is like a big, what we talked about last week, a kind of a big experiment on society, because the people who created this, I'm not sure they knew exactly how it was going to pan out. They might have ideas, but definitely the users, the public, you don't know how it's going to pan out. And it's kind of affected so many parts of our lives now. It's, to be able to navigate it is a real kind of, it's an art and science, but it's a moving art and science because culture is changing so quickly, partly down to social media and technology, that you have to kind of stay up to date with your relationship with it.
For sure. And in a way that, to me, the research part of my brain is loves that, because, when have we ever seen something like this in terms of technology where so many people across the world were plugged into it. And it was, as you were saying, this moving target where I think also the behavior of people is shaping it to a certain extent. But I, for instance, do wonder where the power structure with the algorithm is, because I think the algorithm is doing a bit more of the behavior shaping than we are at this point. And I love especially that you're having me on, because when people talk to me about Instagram, every time I tell someone I'm doing a PhD on Instagram, they just inhale. And then for 5 minutes, they just start like, what about this? And can you make me famous? And why does it suck so much? What can I do? And it's wonderful because people are really, I can tell that this is something that's really on people's minds. But when I think about it, we've had this technology in our lives for, let's say, 15 years. And when have we ever really made a conscious decision about, well, what do I want out of this? Why am I on it? What is my expectation around it? And what do I want this technology to do in our lives or in my life? Because we sort of slid into it, right? Because it was cool and it was really fun to be on Instagram in the beginning, or all these apps. And then, I don't think we really took the step to reflect, well, what is this bringing to me and what do I want to get out of it? And my work really, and why, I do the research for myself because I'm curious, but the work I'm doing is really to share tools and knowledge with people so they can actually ask themselves this question and then take steps to move in that direction, even though, we have to consider it's a pretty challenging world because we are dealing with behemoths of companies that have pretty far-reaching, I would say, effects on how we are online and what we can see online, what we can do. But there are things we can do, and we can, from our point of view or from our side, we can design these relationships in a way. And I think that's super important to be aware of.
It's tricky though, because if we kind of started off in a place where we're interested and curious, and now it's kind of part of our habits, and we're not really consciously making a decision. That's kind of like what addicts do. People who are addicted to alcohol or anything, or gambling. That's the same rationale. It's like, I just started off, and now I just do it without really thinking.
Yeah. And I think it's actually great that you're bringing up this point of addiction, because there are, I would say, not everyone who likes to scroll is addicted. There's a spectrum and there are things going on, but there's a wonderful book by Adam Alter on this. And he talks about the behavioral addictions around our devices, because it's usually not just Instagram. It's also Instagram on your smartphone and the notifications you receive, how often we pick up our phones.
If you had to go to a public library to log on to Instagram, I don't think it'd be addictive.
Exactly.
It's because it's so easy.
Yeah,
on
exactly.
our phones.
Yeah, because the cost, in a sense, I'm just going to pick it up again. What does it matter? But it does matter because it disrupts your focus, and it disrupts contrary to what a lot of people like to tell themselves, multitasking, from the studies I've read and found, isn't so great. Our brains are not really set up for it, especially when it's media multitasking. So when we scroll and watch a movie, or when we text and watch a movie, that is not so great, because it runs on the same track in our minds. If you want to fold laundry and listen to a podcast, that's fine, because that's totally disjunct, or unrelated things that you're doing. But this the addiction problem it's there for sure, and it has to do with how these platforms are programmed. Because I'm just going to go off on a tangent for a second. The way we're living right now, or what this relates to, is called the attention economy. And basically, when you look at how much content there's out there, everyone's producing content every day: blog articles, posts, videos, reels. None of us have the capacity or lifetime span to ever look at all of that content. So really, it's a competition for our attention. And the attention is sort of, economists would call it the scarce good. It's the thing that's limited. It's the bottleneck. Whatever goes through our attention has eyeballs on the content, and potentially leads to a purchase, or whatever your intent behind putting out the content is. So these companies then design the apps in a way that we spend more time on them, as much on them as possible, because the longer we scroll, the more advertisement we see, the more data they can harvest from us. And of course, there's a huge incentive to make this as addictive to us as possible, which is a problem, because if you're trying to to disengage from that and take steps back, you really need to know how this is working. Also, to not feel so bad about being addicted to your phone, because that's also something I hear a lot. It's like, oh, can't put my phone down, I feel so bad, this beating ourselves up about it. Then also, how can we disrupt these mechanisms? What can we do to create more distance between our phones and ourselves, in the way we want to, of course?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, back to the attention thing. I mean, one of the things, like, overall, my belief that Instagram and social media is a slightly net negative. I know you're a bit more balanced than I am, which we'll talk about, but I do feel like it brings out the worst in often, like, human behavior. And one of the things which real life is quite nuanced, and we do lots of things, particularly in social interactions. But when we're just trying to get attention, and we get rewarded for attention, then it's kind of ego, narcissistic kind of things are there. That's why on Instagram, if you write a really detailed post about humanity, 4 people might like it. But if you bend over in some yoga pants, you'll get a lot more likes, or if you just think really, really funny, or if you're a guy, you're really jacked. It's always like, it's kind of real base stuff, like the base human needs, when they're kind of, and if you see people who are really popular, they've kind of tapped into that, where it's either very sexualized, or just very amusing, or very, like, they do things to an extreme level, where if you actually met that person and they were like that all the time, you would not want to be friends with them. But in terms of stimulating our little dopamine receptors, it's quite nice. And that's the issue I have with it. I know for me, when I spend a lot of time on social media, even though I feel like I've got it together, as people go, I feel like it draws me into trying to show off, and I don't want to show off, and to, like I said, slightly narcissistic traits, because I know certain things will go down better. So I have to actively rebel against that, which means I'll have less followers, but I still like it when 1,000 people like a post more than one person likes it. So it's like, it's not like I'm a Buddha here, but it's very tricky. I mean, what do you think about that in terms of bringing out the worst in people? I mean, maybe I'm being too negative. Do you think it brings out some positive things as well?
Oh, wow.
A lot of discuss.
I love it. It's a very philosophical question, I find. I'm of two minds here, because I've seen really wonderful things on Instagram. There's, especially when you think about the wellness movement and all the information that's accessible now, of course, if it comes through somebody, looking really good in a yoga pose and a tight pair of pants, then, is that really a problem? I don't know. It's tricky. I would rather have that information be accessible than not, because when I think back to the age before social media, it was, I think, a lot harder to come by a couple of those things. At the same time, that also opens up a corridor for misinformation or lies or hatred.
That's the thing. It used to be harder to be an authority in terms of, let's say, fitness or yoga. You'd have to actually talk to a yogi or actually read a book about it. Now, anyone can sort of give yoga advice, even if they're not qualified. So more information isn't necessarily better information.
I agree. And I love that you're bringing this up, because I have my personal gripes around the stereotype or the idea of the online guru, because really, who is this idea that we have this person who's, I think you don't always have to have a university degree or a certain, suite of papers to be an expert in your field. It can also come through years and years and years of experience and learning. But I really question this dynamic we have. And I think it also has to do with the name follower and user, right? If you're a follower of somebody, then are they a leader immediately? Or what happens in that relationship, right? What happens in that relationship? And it's funny because in some countries they had different translations. It could be a subscriber, right? You could be a subscriber to somebody, and that already changes the dynamic a little bit, because I'm not a native English speaker, but when I think of a subscriber, I see someone subscribing to a newspaper, right? I don't see somebody following the New York Times, for instance. I see
but I hear you, but on YouTube you have subscribers, and YouTube has just as much fandom as it does on Instagram, doesn't it?
It does, I think. And I also love that you're challenging me on this. This is intellectually, this is very fun. I think what I see online in general is when we go and talk about this expert role, there's this dynamic of one person says what's good for you, and then the other people are just here to ingest it. And I don't think that the way it is, especially Instagram with its short form content or the short videos, the short sort of bite-sized pieces of information. Yeah, sure, people use Instagram for microblogging, but have you ever scrolled through an 8 slide post? Not everyone has that amount of time or the attention span. So what happens when we enter into these sort of parasocial relationships with somebody who's then our, I don't want to say guru, but the expert, without questioning that? And I think it's really, really, even, as you're listening to me, I want you to question what I'm saying. If you're listening to this, and I want you to see and evaluate, well, what is she saying that actually makes sense for my life right now? And maybe what's information I can put on the shelf for later, and what is just not helpful for me? Because I really care about people with the information that I give, or that's available online. You need to make up your own mind how you use it.
But the thing is, Johanna, when I take advice from people, if someone says something meaningful, I can't separate that particular advice from who the person is. So I listen to your advice because I know you've had a very interesting multiple careers. You're very smart, you're intelligent, you've got insights, and it's because of your background. I've stalked you a little bit, so
we already had
that's why. But if you were like 19 and telling me, hey, Instagram, it's like some's good, some's bad, it's like, well, I'm like, yeah, I get that, but what do you know about it? Because you're so young. Have you studied it? Do you really know? Are you a political scientist? Are you a philosopher? Do you understand neuroscience? Do you understand the history? So the problem is, like, when people post things and they sort of give advice all the time, because it's not everyone's an expert, and things like Instagram is definitely weighted towards people who are younger, and look good, tend to get more likes rather than how many qualifications they've got. So it's like that's why I have an issue with it, because there's advice everywhere, and a lot of people are getting more used to kind of sprouting advice, I think. That may be a generational thing, but like for me, like I'm in my mid-40s, and now I feel like, okay, I don't mind sort of talking to strangers and telling them what I think, because I think I've earned the right a little bit. But at 25, I'd be very nervous about sort of telling people what I thought about life, maybe my career a little bit, but to give people advice, I think you have to earn that a little bit. But that is definitely a generational issue, I think, with me, because I think people are so used to sort of giving advice, and I see influencers, which is another weird term, because what exactly are we influencing? it's a very odd term, because to be an influencer is a really an amazing thing to be called. If you really influence someone, I mean, I'd love to influence people. I mean, that's amazing. But the words has been so kind of dumbed down to someone basically being a sales rep for shitty products on Instagram. that's not really influencing, is it? Anyway, I feel I'm going to go off on a rant, so I'm going to stop myself.
I really appreciate your candor around this. You know, I think for me, with this expert and advice giving role online, a lot of it has to do with also making transparent what your level of knowledge is about something and what your experience with it. Because if I had been, let's say, a social media manager for 3 years, that makes me an expert in some ways, right? Then I think that's also the quality of the advice you can get online. Does the person, or something you can ask yourself when you look at somebody's profiles, okay, that person might seem a bit young, that I don't want to hold that against them necessarily, but then I want to know why, what empowers you, why do you think that you have what it takes to speak about this as an authority? If you've been running a company's social media for 5 years, then yeah, fine. I get that. I get there's something behind that. But I think, and I agree with you, what's really dangerous is when we have people who feel called to do certain things and they can't quite substantiate, where they get their authority from or what their level of experience.
But nowadays, we live in a world where social proof is a very common thing in the world of kind of like marketing speak, to actually prove you're legitimate. Now, if you don't know what you're talking about, but you got a blue tick or you've got 20,000 followers or 100,000 followers, to the untrained eye, they'll be like, well, they must know what they're talking about. Otherwise, why have they got so many followers? Yeah. So that's why if you've got 1 million followers, it's easy to get 1.5 million. Where if you've got 9 followers, it's a lot harder to get 30 followers. It gets easier the more kind of famous you get, because people go, oh, they must be trustworthy.
Yeah. But, and isn't that funny, just how the social dynamic around this that you're describing is, to me, we see that and when you think about politics as well, when there's a big enough group, it feels like, oh, I can join them. This seems reasonable because other people have already joined, right? Or imagine getting a new party off the ground. It's bordering on impossible because it's just 5 people, and why would anyone join? But as soon as you have sort of this critical mass, then all of a sudden, or when we look at social change, for instance, when we have a certain critical mass of people, then it seems, oh, this might not be so bad. And especially this dynamic around the blue tick that you mentioned is it's so interesting how it's just that thing that makes people trust you maybe more, that makes people consider what you're saying more. And conversely, if you don't have it, and I think this is when we think about society and our opportunities in society, also when you don't have the blue tick and you try to do something that's public facing, or often they ask you, but what is your audience like, right? When you try to, when you pitch yourself to a podcast or do things. And I can see from a marketing point of view that that's important, right? Because more 2 big audiences merging has benefits for both sides. And at the same time, it leads to the same ideas being regurgitated and known, it's very hard for fresh ideas to come in, for instance, because if it's only about meeting up with people or connecting with people who already have that level of, that you were mentioning, 1 million, then, it's easier to get to 1.5 million. Then we create a space where things are more and more homogenous, because the people who are, influencing, quote unquote, or who are giving us inspiration are, pretty much the same, or we're seeing a lot of the same things. And this tendency for sameness is something that it comes through the algorithm, probably in part.
Which is ironic, because you'd think, like, on the surface level, having more people connected and being a kind of, I guess, like a flatter, fairer way where anyone can have a voice, you'd think there'd be more creativity and more ideas, but there are just lots of little tribes, lots of echo chambers knocking around.
Yeah, and I think this has, because especially when you think about the algorithm is this sort of central filtering instance, right there. Please
tell us more, for people who are not fully aware, and me too, about the algorithm. Everyone talks about the algorithm. I know no one knows exactly what it is, but can we talk a bit more about, explain like the history behind it and like what the idea behind it is on a business point of view?
For sure. I mean, if I knew the Instagram algorithm,
you'd be
by
very
heart,
popular.
I'd be very popular. So if I'm going to tell you after the show for sure. But so an algorithm basically it's when you have a bunch of data and you want to make sense of it, you have to figure out a mechanism to filter this data. And the more when you think about Instagram, for instance, you have people all over the world, different age groups, different interests. I like pizza, you don't like it. And there's so much data you can collect from people. And then the question is sort of, but what do they like, right? What do they want to see? And when you think about it from an advertising point of view, of course, if I like pizza, then the assumption is, I'm going to show her more advertisements for pizza restaurants around her, trip to Italy, that seems pretty likely, because they have a lot of pizza there. And when you think about the fact that these platforms have to make money, then it would be fairly obvious to go for an advertisement model like that, where you show people what they like based on what they've already clicked on. And that's sort of where the algorithm comes in as this sort of amorphous, sort of ephemeral thing that we talk about, this computer program, this very complex computer program that filters and distributes information in a way that based on what information you fed it and what goals you assign to it, shows us information based on what we've already seen or what we've already liked at least on Instagram, right? And I told you this last week when we talked, was I made the grave mistake of liking a video of penguins and then sending it to a friend. And the logic of the algorithm of this program, it's a very, very complex program. It's not just that there's two screws and then you sort of attune it. It's very complex because it's being fed with insane amounts of data. And then this program behind it assumes, she likes penguins and we want her to be on this platform more. So we're going to show her a lot of penguin videos and penguin memes and penguin photos. And then for an entire week, my feed was full of penguins, and it gets a bit old after that.
But that's the key though, isn't it? It's to keep you on the platform, because on a business model, this is how people make their money, because you can sell more advertising. It's a better advertising platform the more times people spend on there.
Exactly. And you'll maybe have noticed as a user that when I try to curate my feed, especially so it's chill and it has nice things. And because there's also another thing when we scroll, we go into a state of arousal. Studies have shown, and arousal is not necessarily in the sexual way. It's just we are sort of on edge, right? We're like, ooh, what is this? This is sort of, maybe you feel this actually when you scroll. I feel it. I'm a little bit like, it would be like I've just had a strong shot of espresso. I'm a little antsy. And when you're in that state, you're already, you're not relaxed. You're probably more susceptible for things coming in. And I try to curate my feed in a way where what I see enhances my reality, or it makes me happy to see it, or inspires me. But of course, because of how this business model functions right now, when you, for instance, follow a clothing company, then they will show you lots and lots of advertisements of clothing companies that are really similar to what you just looked at. And at some point, and I think where they're overdoing it at this moment, is you see so much of the same with, the intention that, at some point you're going to see something that you're going to click on and buy, that it becomes very homogenized. The content you're seeing is becoming very homogenized. And I think that's sort of where I would say the human intelligence, or maybe the human brain, just because we're seeing more of the same and it's sort of being shoved down our throats right now, it doesn't necessarily, in my opinion at least, lead to certain purchases, because it can also be the other way around. Again, maybe you feel this too, when somebody is selling to you too aggressively, it's like, what, I don't want this. I don't care. At least
but it's also a good reminder, these social platforms, if they're completely free, if we don't have to pay to use them, then they're not purely social. They are advertising platforms. It's that thing where if you're not paying for a product, you are a product. So they're using your data. Mm-hmm. So I think it's good to remind ourselves of that. I don't think we can get too annoyed if it's for free. Yeah.
Well,
I think accepting it, then it makes it easier to think, okay, this is what's happening. I understand that they're trying to make money. They're using, I'm a product for them. They need users on here. There are some benefits, but there's also a bias for this.
Yeah.
So when we're aware, we can make better decisions.
For sure. I mean, from an ethical point of view, just as a researcher, I do wonder, where's the boundary with that? Because at some point we sign up for this for free, quote unquote, but they're harvesting our data. So as you were saying, if it's for free, we're the product, and they're getting, the amounts of data they have on us. And if you consider, I've been using Facebook for 15 years, they probably know more about me than I know about myself, because they have a log that's absolute. And my memory is very kind to me. We forget things or things that are irrelevant. Facebook doesn't. And I think this initial bargain we went into is like, oh, this is free, okay, show me a couple of advertisements. I think we're way past that already, because of how uneven the balance is. And that's even, in terms of what they know about us and what we know about them and what they can do with this data. When you think about Cambridge Analytica, for instance, that sure, tack on the advertisement, but it's a really uneven bargain. Basically, we're on the losing side. And the question now is, how can we mitigate that? And how can we protect ourselves a bit from the dynamic of this platform hijacking the weak points in our brain? Right?
And I think it's good to remember that, like, where platforms, there's not much advertising on there, like TikTok, there's not much advertising. There will be, like Instagram didn't, all accounts, if they're going to make money, if they're a business endeavor, will eventually have to have some sort of business model behind it. And it's either going to be you have to pay to play, or you have to have advertising. I can't think of a way around it, unless it's just a purely philanthropist kind of endeavor, which seems...
who can afford that? That's also,
exactly.
This asks a really interesting question, actually, because there's also this debate around, should the internet be a public good? And what would happen if we made it that? And, what would happen if you, sort of continue that argument in your mind? What would happen if we made social media a public good? I'm not just spinning this idea. I'm not for or against it. I've actually not thought about it.
Instagram, when the web was invented, it was purely designed to be for the public, wasn't it? Like, and then only then, when companies like, oh, we'll have our own servers, we'll have a little section for ourselves, and then we can. But initially, that was never the idea. When the first blogs came out, and back in the 80s, when they first connected it all up.
Just how innocent we were, I think. Different time.
Let's talk about the effect of it. So Instagram is obviously, about all social media, but I think most people listening, me too, spend more time on Instagram. I think Instagram has got a certain demographic. Like, if you're over maybe like 25 to like 40, that's probably and I know for me, Instagram's the last social media platform I'm ever going to bother to learn. I'm too old to learn TikTok or anything else which comes out. So this is because I know this one, and I'm at an age where I don't want change as much as I did when I was 20. So I think it's going to be like when you see 60-year-olds on Facebook, they're not going to go to TikTok. It's that thing. So I know I'm on TikTok. So I'm on Instagram. So let's talk about the effect. So first of all, the effect on... We've talked a little bit on society, but let's talk about on an individual level, different topics. Let's start off with dating, relationships.
Ooh. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Who hasn't looked somebody up, online before they went on a date with them? And what happens if you don't like what they're showing on Instagram?
Is that good or bad if you look someone up before going on a date?
I think it depends on how you deal with this information. Because let's be realistic. Nobody's a monk. Nobody's going to be like, oh, I'm not going to look that person
Well, it's
up.
good. If someone's like, seems really dodgy, then I guess it's good if you have a little bit of background. But on the downside, it's like, a little bit of mystique is actually quite exciting, particularly when you're meeting people. And if you know everything about them and know how many followers they got and what job they do and everything, what's the point of going out on a date with them? You already know them.
Yeah. And also, you make up this image of a person in your mind, even, let's leaving out the dodgy people, but just let's go for sort of standard experience. You scroll through their profile up until 4 years ago or something, because we all have our entire history online. And in your mind, you start spinning this image of them, and you start creating this image of them, and then you meet them and they're nothing like you thought. And that can be a good or a bad thing. But what if you discount somebody based on their public,
their projected version of how of their avatar?
Yeah, the avatar.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good way of putting it, because of course we're going to put our whatever we think is our best foot forward online. And it's sort of, I almost see it, these public profiles that we have is sort of the PR version of ourselves. If we were and we've talked about this in our conversation before the podcast before, what happens with the logic of celebrity? Are we all sort of pretending to be mini celebrities, showing off our lives and how awesome we are? So I try to see Instagram as, this is just the PR version, that the version I want you to see of me that's perfect and glowy and only eats avocado toast and, really fancy fruit bowls, because I never have touched a chip in my life, right? But what I would say is I would really encourage people who are going on a date, for instance, maybe, challenge yourself to not scroll and see what happens. I mean, again, aside, if you feel like that person might be dodgy, it's actually probably not the worst idea to look them up. But what if you allowed yourself to sort of submit to that intrigue and to the mystique, and
maybe just scroll a little bit just to say, okay, they've got a
just
job and normal,
past 2 months,
and then just stop. Don't look back the last 8 years of who they used to date. And,
exactly. Or you could also be really just wondering about this. What if you're really open about something, like, what, I saw this post from 8 years ago, and I'm not even gonna lie, I looked you up online because it was public. Tell me what happened there. No. But when you go to the meta level and zoom out a little bit, of course, isn't it weird that our prospects of finding a life partner or a long-term partner, if that's what we want, is affected by how we show ourselves online or how we are portraying ourselves online? I think that actually is something that's a bit, not concerning to me, but a bit weird, I would say. Because it's just another level of pressure to deal with.
If a 15-year-old wants to date someone now, they slide into their DMs and they like the pictures. Where, like, when I, dated people in like my 20s, I'd actually kind of like go up to people and go, hello, and just make conversation. It was very different. Meet people in bars and clubs. And I don't know if that happens much nowadays, but it's a different skill set you need. Like, to be kind of successful. Back in the day, you needed a different communication skills than now. If I was single now, I wouldn't have a clue how to meet someone, because I don't really know the language of social media dating or social media flirting. I've got no idea what's appropriate, what's not, because I don't do it, because I've been married for so long. So it's I think we all have to learn the skills depending on what platform or communication style we're going to use. I think it's with dating, I just think it's interesting, because it's like not just going on dates, but also a lot of time we do stuff in life to subconsciously to attract someone from the opposite sex or same sex, and how we portray ourselves, our personal branding, which is a big thing on social media. A lot of that is like, how do we become more attractive so we can get laid more or get married? That is a primal thing, and it's like, you see a lot of people posting, and it's like they're trying to show off how sexy they are, which is an interesting phenomena.
To say the least, yeah.
When I say interesting, I mean ridiculous. That's my I can't. I find it particularly amusing. Again, I just feel old, because when I see guys like in their 20s trying to kind of act sexy on an Instagram post, like dancing or taking the shirt off or pouting, I just find it hilarious. But I don't know. Maybe if I was a 20-year-old girl, that would be like, oh my God, that's so cool. A guy pouting and taking his clothes off and showcasing his life. But I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a generational thing rather than just, I don't know. You tell me, you're the expert.
Look, I mean, I can't tell you how to perceive that, but I think,
please, I'm stuck. I need a resolution in my head. I see too many hot 20-year-old guys, and I don't know how to deal with it. Maybe I'm just getting old. I'm like, the idiots. That's the way I'm dealing with this.
I, from this sort of research point of view that I have, I would say what we're seeing a lot is performance, right? Somebody's performing the idea of what they think is going to make them look attractive. We're performing authenticity also. I see that's a big one.
Fake authenticity is
fake
really big at the
authenticity
moment.
has come up a lot in conversations in the past year for me. Where do we draw the line? I like in a way that people feel emboldened or feel safe to share what they're going through emotionally, to help others, and at the same time we've also learned now that if we do that, then we'll get more likes and we'll also have more reach. And I remember Adam Mosseri, the head of Instagram, does weekly videos. If you're really into Instagram, those are interesting to watch because he's basically laying out what they're doing. And somebody asked if they were ever going to do something where you could schedule a reel on the phone or something along the lines of that. And he said no, because they want spontaneous, authentic expression. So they know that, if we feel very strong emotions and if we feel we want to share them online, that gets you engagement, because otherwise what would be the reason for them to want to continue to have that and to sort of foster that? And the performative aspect of guys pouting and taking off their shirts, it's just another layer of that, or another sort of shape.
I mean, that's not quite as harmful, I think, than there's seem an alarming amount of people, more so on TikTok and Instagram, who are young people who talk about toxic relationships, trauma, and it's like, I'm not always convinced. I mean, obviously I don't know everyone, but I'm not always convinced that so many people are dealing with real trauma, and because that's like a major thing. Or a toxic relationship, that's not a bad relationship. A bad relationship is a bad relationship, but a toxic one is something different. And I do find that there's a lot of hyperbole, that like words are exaggerated a lot, particularly negative ones, because it gets you more attention. If you say, "Oh yeah, I had a bad day, it wasn't great." If you say, "Oh my God, it was the worst date ever," or "I went on the best holiday ever," that gets more attention. Saying, "Yeah, it was all right. How you doing? I'm okay." Yeah. Because that middle ground where normal life lives is not grabbing your attention. So that's why, and you're a political scientist. Look at the politics, particularly in America, where everything's been, actually during Brexit and during COVID as well, everything seems to be exaggerated. And more left and more right, and it's like I don't know. I mean, as talking from a political scientist point of view, how do you understand that? How do you articulate that? Because I'm not doing a very good job of it.
I love that you're bringing this up, because this is basically where Instagram, what we call the frivolous people taking off their shirts and trying to look hot. That the logic behind that, it's not them taking off their shirts, what we talked about earlier, that leads to the political outcomes, but it's the logic behind it. And what you were saying, I see this too, that there's this bifurcation of extremes. There's either this or that, and I think that has to do with a couple of things. One, we know that really punchy stuff, punchy headlines, punchy posts, whatever it is, things that automatically compute, right? Or somebody looking sexy, that always computes. You're like, ooh, who's that? Ooh, I'm gonna give a like. Or ooh, that makes me feel like shit because I don't look like that. It's an extreme reaction in both ways, but it is an extreme reaction, and that draws us in some ways or another, or at least it stays on our mind. And so that's one thing. Then we have echo chambers, where the algorithm, as I was sharing earlier, when you click on a penguin video, then you see more penguins. That also happens with opinions. Think about a neo-Nazi who clicks on neo-Nazi content and then keeps seeing more and more and more and more of that,
until theorists and QAnon and flat Earth theory.
Until they live in a world like that. I mean, they do already in the real world, but I think the difference also with these people is before, I think you'll always have these types of people, just because of how, when you go to statistics, there's a sort of normal distribution. You'll have a big chunk of people in the middle, and then you have a couple of people on the fringes. But the really big problem that I see is you have these people far and few in between, maybe, a couple living in the village and then another one in a town or in the city. But now their worldview is affirmed by what they're seeing and what the algorithm, or what the logic of the platform keeps showing them, and they can connect to each other. right? So that's the big change when you
Well,
look
this is
at
why, I mean, there's
that.
been a huge rise in tribalism, and
Mhm.
people like Douglas Murray in his Madness of Crowds book, which is great,
Mhm.
and Jordan Peterson often talk about the dangers of tribalism. And I think
Yeah.
social media has maybe fueled that. I don't know if it's fueled it or has it been a mirror to it. What do you think?
I definitely think so, because you really have to go out of your way now on social media. I'm talking about social media in general now, to see something that does not confirm with your worldview / what you have shown the algorithm you've liked before. So it's very easy. And I think we've been living in this type of world for a couple of years now, where you only see what caters to you, right? And you don't have to deal with things that you don't like, or that you haven't clicked on before, you haven't shown any interest in before. So if we're spending a lot of time online, and if we're used to seeing only what we like or what we mostly like, what does that mean for society when we have to deal with people whose opinion we don't share? We have to be able to have debates and discussions, but online we just see, oh, it's this way or that
There's
way,
not,
and there's
yeah.
no
When a
room
debate
for,
starts, normally
yeah.
people get more entrenched in their views and they double back rather than saying, "Oh, that's an interesting point. Tell me more." It's normally like, "No, no, no," and they use like straw man arguments or other areas, and they kind of entrench rather than actually coming together. But
Yeah.
that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way, but
Yeah.
I mean,
And
that means then it's affecting on a societal level empathy and compassion, which is literally putting yourself in someone else's shoes and thinking about it. And you're saying that social media is basically doing the opposite.
well, you have to less, at least, right? Because
Yeah.
you're not. And I think especially these past 2 years, when we spent a lot of time at home, all opportunities for social, we've always moved in bubbles in a way, right? I like hanging out with people who are interested in similar things than I am, but that doesn't mean they have to be sort of almost clones of my interest. So it's not like a 75% data match of them liking penguins pizza in Italy, for instance. If we stick with the examples I had before, there's always variation, and there's people are going to have different opinions. But online, I feel like
Well,
that's less the
that's
case.
down to
And
personal branding though as well, isn't it? Because if we're and that tribalism thing, if we have to kind of explain who we are in our Instagram bio, it's like, hey, I'm a feminist, or I'm black, or I'm this, or I'm that. That is in a way,
label, and there's no
yeah,
room for the gray space. And especially for a democracy is only, to me, it's only gray space, because I have this opinion, you have that opinion, this is the majority, and the minority wants something else. And how are we going to negotiate the interests of these different groups to have an outcome that doesn't harm anyone, and ideally puts forward what is best for the largest group of people? I mean, it's very simplistic. I know people who maybe political scientists will be like, oh, that's underselling it. But I think that's really practical way of looking at it. And when through the pandemic, for instance, we're not everything else where you would meet people in real life, on public transportation, in public spaces. I think public spaces are really important, because especially because we love being in our filter bubbles, that's the only way now where you're confronted with other worldviews with someone in real life, and you have a conversation maybe with your Uber or your cab driver. And when that falls away as well, I think that's really problematic, because where are you going to be confronted, or where are you going to be in touch with somebody who's not like you or like your preferences? And I think that, to me, in a nutshell, is why I think in the long run, this is actually most problematic for democracy. Yes, there's the misinformation, there's all the other things, but that could, in theory at least, be fixed from a technical point of view, right? You would have to look at the algorithm and see what happens, or you would have to look at what Facebook does and where they're selling the data. I mean, I think that's something that could be addressed, but what do you do with the long-term social consequences of really the social fabric getting stretched very, very thin, because we're not used to dealing with each other anymore, and we're not really able to tolerate different opinions because we're not used to seeing them anymore, and we're not really comfortable with the gray spaces that are not, life is like this, a free line,
the nuance,
motivational statement on Instagram. Often life, it's also not about overcomplicating it, but life often is very
life is messy and unfair and complex, and it doesn't always seem that way when we're on social media, does it? It doesn't help. Like I said, if you write a post saying, just talking about a mundane thing you're doing that day, no one cares. And it's like,
that's life.
Yeah, it's interesting. How about talk about society, the effects from society, democracy? How about mental health effects? These have been talked about in the last couple of years. These have been more openly discussed, and I think more people are aware that it's not great. I mean, even didn't China recently, for teenagers, haven't they limited social media usage just like an hour a day, I think?
Yeah, I don't know. I would need to Google that.
Not that China is like the people we should always copy in terms of ethical decisions, but when you're like a big country like that, they can. It's interesting that they have made this kind of decision that actually it's bad for teenagers. So because it's not democracy, they can just go like that. In the West, it's harder to do such a thing.
It's interesting for sure to think about, what would their rationale behind this be? Why would they roll out something like that? I basically on my laptop have a folder with dozens and dozens and dozens of studies on just, the shade and flavor that Instagram or social media is specifically bad for mental health. And it's mostly when we see body dysmorphia for, especially young women, and could go up to 30, even mid 30s. I think also depending on how long we've been used to this on Instagram. But all the studies I've seen from, other disciplines, they all point to this, that social media is really just not that great for your mental health. And it's also affecting young men too, which I thought was interesting.
So there's body dysmorphia. That's just purely from exposure to seeing like people who are bigger or leaner or whatever your ideal body is in your head. You see more of that because you're searching for that. So you see more of it and it makes you feel worse about yourself? Or is it more complex than that?
Yeah, I think it's more complex than that because it's often more exacerbating it. I think, if you lived again, with how this works and how we're seeing more and more content that we click on, if you look at this, or, if you look at a video of somebody in a bikini or whatever, who's really toned, and you do that again and again, your feed is going to look like that and your discovery section is going to look like that. And the balance is off, right? So whatever might have already been there in terms of what's going on in, maybe the young woman's mind or in her emotions, well, if you only see people like that when you scroll, it's going to make it that much worse.
Because it's natural to compare when we see.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when I was a teenager, fortunately, that was before the age of social media. So I had celebrity and fashion magazines, and that already had an impact on me. But I would not want to imagine what it's like to be 15 or 16 right now, and growing in your body, and all of a sudden you see people your age too, or with filters and everything, and Photoshop. I mean,
there's actually a big problem in the fitness, particularly in the fitness world on Instagram, TikTok, particularly teenage boys with steroid use. It's huge now. It's growing massively. Where you get these like 17-year-old guys who are like ripped with these big chests and biceps, and that's not normal. That's not normal at all. And I think you see the successful ones who've got the contracts with Gymshark or stuff like that. And if you're a 16-year-old lad and you're looking at this, it makes you feel just insecure, because you're insecure anyway at that age. It's going to make you feel even worse, because we see the success stories. Same as like people who want to be social media influencers, and they spend all day, they see the people who've made it, the Jake Pauls and the Mr. Beasts, and they've got millions, but they don't see the millions of 20-year-olds out there who are posting every day and not making a penny.
Yeah.
Because we don't get exposed to them. We only get exposed to the success stories, if you want to call it successful.
Yeah. And I mean, in a way that's been around. I mean, you would call this confirmation bias, I think. No, not confirmation. There was no, you need to cut this. I need to. Oh, it's spelled. So, okay. So you would call this.
I'm not cutting this. You're far too smart. We need to show your. Otherwise, it'll be fake authentic, wouldn't we?
You said. Or leave it in. Actually, it's called Survivor.
Saying
What?
So you were saying
you found my button. The survivorship bias, you would call that, right?
Yeah.
When you have an actor and they win the Oscar and everyone thinks, oh, I'm going to move to LA and I'll become an actor and it's going to work out for me. And for everyone who beats the odds, you look at them and you're like, oh, I can do it as well. So I would say that's been around for a long time. But again, I think for a lot of these things that we're seeing, it's not necessarily that social media brought them, they originate from social media, but I feel like it's just like
exacerbates.
They're exacerbating.
Yeah.
Just putting petrol on a fire, basically. It's like, ooh, boof.
That's going back to my earlier argument. That's just saying I think it brings out the worst in us and arguably the worst in society. I mean, thinking what you're saying about the empathy and compassion, but let's go back from the other side, because I know you're more middle of the road, more nuanced than I am, a bit more Buddhist about it, the middle path. So what are the benefits of, like, what do you see the benefits of social media and Instagram are on an individual level and on a societal level or cultural level?
Yeah. So I would say it's still having, at this point in time, having the opportunity to have global connectivity, just in theory. I mean, we know it looks different, but if we look at the positives, it's still you and I being able to have this conversation. It happened because you saw my comment on somebody's Instagram post, I think, and that made you research me and what I do. So it's still wonderful to connect with people that way, and how it can bring people together for positive things, right? I have a couple of people who are my Twitter friends, and I, occasionally call them and we tell each other about our lives, but we've never met each other. And I think
so you've used Instagram as like I have, like I like Instagram, for example, on DMs, and when I use it to actually make friendships, but I don't like commenting and liking things. It's so superficial. But actually, when like this, like I don't mind spending 2 minutes or like half an hour researching people on Instagram to end up having a 2-hour conversation with you. That's for me well worth my time. So I don't want to spend 5 hours on Instagram to have a 2-minute conversation with someone real. So for me, as long as it's that way round, then I can see a huge positive in terms of friendships and also work relationships as well.
For sure. And that comes down to us really thinking about, what do we want out of this? You seem to know fairly well what you want out of it, sort of in-depth conversations, connecting with people, but it seems like you have, just mirroring what you're saying. I mean, say no if that's not correct. You're not so much into this whole like show and tell, look, this is me, this is my life aspect. And I think the clarity that you have going into this is really going to help you. It's not going to push everything to the side that's bad about it or challenging about it, but it's going to help you be,
it is, but it's easy for me because I mean, I've got an established business, so I don't really need it for business. It helps, but I don't need it. And also I've got an established social life. I've got an established love life. I'm kind of like, I'm not 21. If I was 21, of course I'd be all over this because it would be all my friends are on there. But even though a lot of my friends aren't on Instagram. So it's like, it's not that essential for my life. So it's quite easy for me to post once a week or so and then delete the app, which I do because I've got no self-control. So I have to delete. I think you do the same. I have to delete the app.
I do this, because I mean, but that's also doing that, is if you know it's, my work, I really want to wake people up or encourage people, if you're noticing, you're like you and I, for instance, and you have no self-control, then it's not going to be a perfect solution. But if you've done your half hour of scrolling, then just delete the app and be done with it. It's nothing to be ashamed about. Of course, I wish I had perfect self-control, especially because I'm researching this and I'm reading all these studies about how much it sucks and how bad it makes you feel. But it's still really addictive. But what good does it do to beat yourself up about it for an hour every day? It's like, ooh, I scroll too much. Well, then just whatever is the easiest solution for you to keep your sanity around this, use that. And there's no reason to be ashamed about it, because that's also something I see come up a lot when people learn that I do this PhD, and they're really there's so much self-criticism. It's like, oh, I shouldn't be on it, and I really hate it, and it makes me feel bad.
When
And
people meet you, they talk about
they love talking about Instagram to me, or just the internet. Depends on what age range they're in. If
Look,
they're
I'm a fitness trainer. When I go to the dentist or anyone, they always justify their lack of training to me. It's like, I don't care. I don't care. They're like, oh yeah, I did a triathlon last week. It's like, I really don't care. But because I'm a fitness instructor for like 30 years, so people think that it's the only thing I think about.
Yeah. Probably also when they're in your presence and they know you do this work and they slump over a bit like, oh, and it's, you kind of want to hide. I think it's also, you want to hide the things of yourself that you already know you're maybe not doing so well. I mean, I went for a run before I did this. it works. So I could see that the same thing comes up with people when I talk about, doing this research, but, make it as easy for yourself as possible. And of course, it's different when you're 21 and all your friends are on TikTok. And at the same time, I've seen, Gen Z is
people listen to this on TikTok like, my God, 21 is so old.
Yeah.
For a 15-year-old, 21 is like ancient.
Yeah. But what I really like about Gen Z is they seem to be very emotionally aware. So you could try also, if it's your close friends on there, you could try talking to them about this and be like, look, how do you feel? How do you feel about it? I'm not doing so well being on TikTok all the time. How about we, find a different way to talk to each other, not in the TikTok DMs? I know that's not always so easy given that there's group pressure and things like that. But at the same
time, that's really good advice, because if you've got like one or two friends who are willing to like come off the platform or take a break from it with you, then the big thing drawing you back in, which is normally like, oh my God, I've missed my friends, I feel out of the loop, that goes.
Exactly. That goes, or at least it goes down, or you can ask them if they post a video, if they can just send it to you, because you can download a TikTok video and you can share it on WhatsApp. I mean, I think so. Even just that, you can, if it's really about staying in touch with your close friends, you can be creative. And there are also new photo apps coming out. I saw that changed the dynamic a bit. There's one originating from Paris that asks, I think, everyone in your circle to take a photo. Maybe it's 3 p.m. and then an alert goes out, take a photo of where you are right now in the next 2 minutes, and then you share that in a way to show, oh, this is what I'm doing right now. This is my life.
I like that.
Yeah, it's nice. And there was another one.
Allows for a bit more authenticity than pouting and.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to be really fast to do the pouting.
Yeah, exactly.
Scared and have the good light.
Outside a Lamborghini in the Maldives.
Yeah. Ooh, I gotta hurry. Get out of my way. I only have 2 minutes to look good. There was another one, I think it's still around, called Dispo. And Dispo was cool because it was, you got a roll of digital film, and where you could do several rolls, and you would take the photos in one day, and then you would have to wait for a day until they would be developed, and everybody on the app would see their quote unquote developed photos at the same time, and then you could share them, and that was that. And that was, I think that's also kind of cool because it takes out the 24-hour aspect of this. You take the photos and you leave them, and you can't post anything until your photos are done, which is kind of cool too.
Having patience isn't a thing which Gen Z or millennials are that famous for.
I'm a millennial.
But it's true. I remember when I went, I spent a lot of time in living and working in different countries when I was younger. And I remember I spent a year in the South Pacific, and I used to be into photography, and I had a proper camera.
Oh, cool.
And I was taking pictures every day, but I had to wait until I got to New Zealand. I was in Tahiti and Cook Islands, and there was no place to develop proper photos. So I had to wait a year to develop my photos. So I used to travel with all my cartridges of photos. And then when I remember digital cameras came out, like 5 or 6 years later after that, and I couldn't believe how amazing it was. I could take a picture and I could see it straight away.
Right? But, so cool.
Yeah, it's, again, I mean, look, I don't want to reminisce, but things change over the years. One of the things I found with me, and I don't blame social media, I blame technology for this, and it's affected me in a negative way. And it's something I've been trying to improve over the last 12 months, is my attention. So I used to very happily, like most people, like I said, my age, back in the day, read books and not be distracted. Where I found in the last sort of 10 years, my attention span has gone down and I do get distracted easily. And I did used to think that multitasking was the way forward. And I'm quite a busy guy with work, a lot of things going on. But in the last couple of years, I've realized that I'm not my most effective when I multitask. And also my lack of ability to really sit and think and ponder and work on one thing for a good few hours at a time is actually harming my goals for my work. So I've actively tried, I'm doing things now to actively improve my attention span.
Yeah. What are you doing? Maybe we can, because I have resources on this too that I can share.
Well, one is acknowledging that distractions happen. So I try to set up in my environment so a distraction is less likely to happen. So when I'm working on my computer, I turn off because I've got WhatsApp on my computer and I've got my emails, I turn those off. So I actually actively turn on and off quite a lot of products. So it's easier. My desktop is very uncluttered. And when I'm writing and doing stuff, I can just focus on that task. Another thing I do, which was very much inspired by my clientele, as you know, I'm a personal trainer and I work with a lot of people in the creative industries on the public eye. I've worked with a lot of musicians and a lot of actors, and musicians and actors have something in common where they tend to focus on one, sometimes two projects a year, and that's it. And I really like that. And I've been doing that with my work over the last 4 years or so, where I have one big goal, one product I want to release or two things I want to do, as opposed to just running around like a headless chicken, which is, you're an executive coach for a while, you know what it's like. And you've been a founder before where you're juggling balls all the time. And it's very easy if you're an entrepreneur, whether you like that word or not, that you are doing 20 different things at once. And sometimes you're putting out fires every day rather than actually looking at the long-term growth and your strategic plan of your business. So I find that my business has grown and I've become more successful by actually just focusing on, hey, this next year, I'm going to really focus on that, or just those two things. And that helps as well. Other things I do, I use planners, something called Trello. I use quite a lot. Like an online system, which you probably know well, people listening. It's like a free thing where you can just compartmentalize your day, or I do it for my week and my month, 6 months and 2 years. And I just put my kind of key tasks. So when I wake up, I don't look at my emails when I wake up. I go into my office. I'm working from home at the moment. And then when I go to my office, I don't log on my emails. I log onto my Trello and I remind myself of my tasks of today, my priorities this week, and even this year. And then I'm not distracted by the things like if phone rings, I never pick it up because it'll be an urgent thing. It's not going to be important unless it's like my wife or my brothers or something, unless it's like a personal matter, then it can't be that important. And, just basically, in a word, it's discipline, because I know I'm not disciplined in my head. So I try to make it easier to be disciplined. And just like any habit, the more you do it, the easier it gets. So now I find it quite easy to spend 2 hours focusing on a task without going, oh, I'll do this or I'll do that. Or my brain doesn't go off in different directions. It focuses on one thing. I don't know the sign. We were talking the other day. I mean, I'm a big fan of Cal Newport's book, Deep Work. And I read that maybe 2 years ago after I've already decided to kind of go down it. So it kind of resonated with me rather than giving me tips. But I did find it confirmed kind of what I believed a little bit about social media. I mean, he's like, just get off it. If you want to achieve something,
get off it. Get anything done.
But it's, be fair, if you're writing a book or creating a film or something major, I think the amount of time you'd save by not having any social media and just locking yourself away for 6 months and doing that thing you really want to do, and then go back on it if you want to show off about how great you did in that 6 months.
Exactly.
But if you really want to get something done, it is a tremendous waste of time. And I mean, I don't know how disciplined you are, but when I look at the times when I've done my most stories or spent time on posts, it's when I'm less productive in my real life.
For sure.
So
I had for sure. I had to get, I would say at the end of last year, I had to really take a look and take stock of what I was doing. And I could tell that my attention span was really, really bad. It was, pretty much non-existent. And I didn't like that because I remembered even when I was in university or before, I remember that feeling of being in high school and really sinking my teeth and my attention into something that I liked. It could be, painting, or it could be music, it could be reading or writing, whatever it is I wanted to do. But it was really about being present and in the moment and doing it, and just getting into this, the flow state, basically, where everything's sort of, where it's just the right amount of challenge, and you love it, right? You're so engrossed in the moment that there's nothing else distracting you. And it was for a while, I also had a corporate consulting client, and I could tell how their communication habits had really, sort of moved over. I had adopted them unwittingly, where, they had a ton of different messaging systems, and there was, Teams chat open all the time and emails. And I tried to get away from it, but it was pretty much, and I feel for people who work in corporations like that, because you might want to try to build healthier habits for yourself, but there's the entire system around you that works differently. So you have to be really, really firm with your boundaries, and maybe even talk to your supervisor around this. So that had sort of carried over. And then social media was really fun for a while. And then I noticed at some point, like, wow, I don't like doing anything hard anymore. I don't like doing anything challenging anymore. I was just, and it was Christmas time also, which is not very conducive to doing anything that's not eating, sleeping, or, hanging out. And then I thought, okay, it's Christmas, that's fine, but I can't go on like this. And so, and I had already done this in the past, but my bad habits sort of had stacked up, and it was just, big blob of nothingness. And so I do it similar to you. I still use my phone as an alarm clock. Most of the days right now, I don't actually use an alarm, which is heaven. I'm very, very grateful my life is that. Shows my inner teenager is very
You're winning.
Yeah, winning at life. But I don't look at my phone before. So, I get up, I drink water, I get ready for the day, and I don't check my phone at all before that. I try to leave it off until noon.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
People don't really, the work I'm doing is not, I'm not a neurosurgeon. If you need something from me, you can send me an email, or you can send me a WhatsApp, or there are channels that you can reach out to if you need me, but none of this is so urgent that it needs to be answered in an hour or two. I mean, I don't have kids yet, so of course that's also different when maybe their school is calling and you need to be available.
Yeah.
But right now, also to frame this so you sort of know what point of view I'm talking from. And I use Notion for my work. So it's sort of, have you heard of it? It's not like Trello, but it's this sort of Swiss Army knife of a digital tool where you can write, you can, store your tasks, you can store files. It's very versatile. I mean, you have to invest a little bit of work to get how it works and how to make it work for you. But I find it's really awesome. And my internet is, I don't, when I write or do things, especially when it's conceptual stuff, I use Notion, and I use it full screen on my laptop. And I even sometimes turn off the Wi-Fi. So I'm not distracted. I'm not tempted. So similar to what you're doing, I'm trying to, or the intention is to get myself to a point where I don't even feel the temptation to do it, because then you start this inner dialogue of, but I could scroll, but I shouldn't, I shouldn't, but I could scroll, but I don't want to, but I could, but I don't want to. And that I find it really grates you down.
I think a large aspect also is like, if you're, I'm working from home. So I think who's in your house, if I had a bunch of 4-year-olds running around, it'd be a lot harder. I mean, I live with one person, my wife, who's a classical pianist, and her entire life is like focusing. When you're a classical pianist, it's like one of the most extreme tasks of focusing you need. So I look to her for inspiration. So it's like, I'm not at her level yet, but it's quite easy for me to have quite a good attention span, because I'm living with someone with an incredible attention span who can do the same thing for 4 hours, and not a distraction would ruin a piece. So you have to be very in the moment, obviously, when you're playing, So I think a lot of it is somewhat luck about who you live with, but whatever situation you're in, there are things we can all do to make our attention better. And I think it's helpful. The reason I'm asking it is to be wary that social media, Instagram, particularly TikTok, but all platforms, they try to get your attention all the
Mhm.
time, which means that you're losing the capacity to concentrate on difficult tasks because we're not using that part of our brain.
Yeah, and especially if you're, if you're any type of entrepreneur, if you're self-employed, if you have a team, the quality of your work that, as you were saying, every time you look at what you have to do in the morning, you look at your daily tasks, weekly tasks, and your yearly goals. And you really need that focus to be able to know where you're going and to stay the course. So anything that's just chatter around you, and in a sense, to me, to be honest, Instagram is it's frivolous chatter. If I have time or if I feel like it, I engage with it or I scroll. But the more and more time I spend doing my work, and the more and more satisfied I am with doing the work I'm doing right now, the less interested I am, because I know it's just going to distract me and it's going to take me away from what I want to do. And also my goal of, figuring out a way to set up this business to not be full time all the time, because I actually want to use technology in a way where it supports me in my life so that I have the gift of presence with the people I'm with, the things I'm doing with, and to feel that I'm rich in time also. I think that's a big one for me, to be autonomous and to be wealthy in time, right? And Instagram doesn't always help with that, to be honest. And what I also use is that I wanted to mention for your listeners, I have a blocking tool. So I use Freedom, and for free, you pay for it once, very old school software contract, and you set a list of pages you want to block, and you set a time frame. And during that time frame, you can't access it. And of course, you could do it 24 hours. So it's basically really challenging to even disable the back end of Freedom and, for you to ever log onto it. But I've noticed, even though it's fairly easy to go to the program, allow Instagram, you scroll and then you leave, just taking that step and, deciding, okay, I'm going to enable it now, but what do I want it for? Do I just want it to, because I want to distract myself from a task I don't want to do, and this is the easier way. I just want to spend some time scrolling to feel good, for procrastination? Or do I actually want to look at something? Or do I just really want to go and, for 15 minutes, just escape the day a little bit, which I think is fine as long as you do it mindfully. But if that turns into 2 hours, that's 2 hours of your lifetime. And that, to me, is really the bottom line of my work, is how do we spend the time? How do we spend the precious time that we have? Do you want to spend it 4 hours a day, twiddling around on Instagram and watching TikTok videos? Or is there other stuff you want to do, or other things you want to enjoy, other things to explore in your life? And that, that to me is really what it's all about. And if you make a conscious choice, and if TikTok is your life and makes you happy, then, who am I to judge? I do think there are better ways to spend your time, to be honest. I'm not gonna pretend I'm
I think if people are doing that and they don't really have any goals, spending some time just thinking about how do you want your life to pan out, what are your goals, that's always time well spent. And there's nothing more exciting than having a big goal. Maybe it's saving money to go traveling, or writing a book, or setting up a business, or whatever it may be. Or, like, there's so many exciting things we can do in life. And I think if you remind yourself of your dreams, as it were, then you see things like TikTok and Instagram as a distraction. Or maybe 10% of it is a useful tool to get you, but you're less likely to be spending like 9 hours a day scrolling, which happens to some people, when they're feeling a bit lost and they're just a bit like that,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's really,
why not? It's better than watching TV all day. It's a bit more entertaining. So, but it's the same thing. So I think always going back to like having some goals is always a useful thing.
For sure. And it really helps you. I love that you're saying this, because whenever you feel drawn, the siren song of Instagram comes on and it says like, ooh, just 10 minutes, 10 minutes, just like Kaa the snake from Jungle Book. It can also help yourself to remind yourself of your goals and ask yourself, well, is this helping me? Is this serving me? Does this make me feel good? And is this serving my goal or my dream? And if the answers are not yes, then what are you doing there?
So before, I want to talk a little bit about your career and how you help people. But before I do that, I want to get to know you a little bit. So I'm going to do a little quick fire round.
Oh, yay.
Random questions. Okay. Favorite book you've read in the last year?
Ooh, last week I read So You've Been Publicly Shamed by John Ronson, and it's a book I read for my PhD, but he talks to the first couple of people who were, the subjects of huge online shamings, and he writes about it in a way that's so empathetic, so considered. I think he's a Brit living in the States, so he's got that British sense of humor that's sort of also the back current of this. So it's a heavy book, and at the same time sometimes it's just funny the way he writes about it, how absurd the online world is and how we're dealing with each other. So I really like that. And my favorite book of all times is Seeing is Forgetting the Name of the Thing One Sees, which is a series of conversations with an artist from the 60s about how he sees the world and what art is to him. And to me, that was just beautiful to get to enter someone's mind and see how he perceives the world. And how I remember there's this section where he talks about how even just the light on the wall, the light hitting the wall at a right angle for him can be a work of art, because it's just nature is so beautiful. And of course that sounds very very woo-woo, but I really connected to that. So that I would say.
No, I love that. There's beauty everywhere if you have your eyes open. All right, link to that. Favorite poem? You seem the kind of girl who likes poetry.
Oh gosh. Actually, so I like Pablo Neruda's love poems. There's, the 20 love poems and the Song of Exasperation. I don't know what it's called in English. Those ones I really like. I like, and in German we have Rilke, who's also
Was ist das?
who's also a great poet. But to be honest, I'm more into visual arts than poetry. But those.
So who's your favorite who's your favorite painter? I love this because I can't do this in real life. It's just weird. But on a podcast, you can ask people random questions and they can answer.
Yeah. So one of my favorite artists for more installation-based work is James Turrell, because he does these sort of spaces of light and colors, and I'm really drawn to that. Favorite painter, I like Ellsworth Kelly and I like Ed Ruscha, because the colors and the sentiment, sort of those. I think for me, it's big spaces of colors. Those are very fun.
Cool. All right, next, favorite exercise?
Running and hiking.
What kind of distances do you run? Don't show off. Be honest. Humility is a new thing this year.
Half an hour to 45 minutes here in the countryside, and I have my standard route that always goes past the neighboring farm's goat pen, so I can pet the.
Whereabouts are you exactly? You in Bavaria, are you?
I'm in Bavaria. Yeah, I'm in a really small town called Berchtesgaden. That most people know from World War II, because that's where the Eagle's Nest is and Hitler had his house. But it's just mountain. It's a small mountain town, basically.
Nice.
Yeah.
What else can I ask you? Favorite place to go on holiday? If you could go anywhere right now on holiday.
Tel Aviv.
What?
Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv. I've never been there. What's so good about it?
Oh, a city with a beach. How cool is that?
Well, I used to live in Rio. That was quite nice.
Ooh,
that was fun. Yeah, it's a nice city and a beach.
How long were you in Rio for?
I was living and working there for a year.
Ooh, how
longer? Yeah.
Very fun. Any other countries you've been to in South America, or where else have you lived? Because you said you lived in.
I've lived
turning the tables.
Yeah, well, I've got an ego. We all like talking about ourselves, don't we? So I'll grab that opportunity. I lived in Asia for a year. I used to be a full-time kickboxer. I lived in Thailand for a year, competing, living as a Thai boxer, like training 6-7 hours a day, and fighting. Did that for a year in Thailand. Lived in New Zealand for a while. I used to have a flat in the Cook Islands. Lived there for a while. New York, lived and worked there for a while. Sydney.
Wow,
so cool. There for a while. Yeah, quite a few places. I've been. My job. I've never had like a proper job. So as a coach, it's easy to kind of just set up shop somewhere else. because it's the same skills. So
Yeah.
even though I don't speak any other languages, but luckily English is quite well spoken in quite a lot of countries. I mean, Brazil was tricky. I was a trainer in Brazil. I had to learn Portuguese, but it's not that difficult just to count and to say, well done. Goodbye, hello. It's not that difficult. Go faster. You don't have to speak that much, but most of the time you can get away with English, which is good for me because I'm a typical Brit, terrible at languages. How about you? Where have you lived?
So I've lived in London for a year, in Vienna for studies, in Madrid for studies, and then I had a job, throughout university, and then after, where I was an editor, and I sort of finagled the job into a remote working opportunity. So basically, I found the way to get farthest away from my boss as possible. And I was in Mexico City for a year at that time.
Oh, wow.
That was awesome. I loved Mexico. And in Bogota for 3 months, which was also really cool. And in LA for 3 months during that period of time too. And that was also very cool.
Amazing. Love it. So what was your first job? Was it the editor job, or did you do something before that?
No, my first job was, so my grandma my first, I think I've always been more of an entrepreneur type of person. So the first thing I did was, my grandma had a bed and breakfast, and I would package up rocks from her garden into a little bag and sell it to her guests at the house for, I don't know, 50 cents.
Wow, that's very entrepreneurial.
Yeah, grandma was not excited, the entrepreneurial spirit was tamed a little bit for a while, but
it's a fun time to be entrepreneurial now. I mean, one of the benefits of social media is actually, if you run a business, it's a lot easier to get your message out there, because we've got these tools everywhere, where before, I mean, I started my business before there was social media, and it was, I remember spending an entire weekend with a friend of mine dropping flyers to in people's houses, and putting signs up in newsagents, and even calling up business, like cold calling businesses and saying, hey, I'm a fitness person, can I give a talk? And just real things which seem quite so archaic in terms of effort, in terms of trying to get business, where now it's a lot easier to drum up business. If you're a bit rubbish at marketing, just post every day and you probably get something, even if you're not very good. When back in the day it was trickier, you'd have to actually physically meet people and invest in flyers and stuff like that.
I mean, the cost to starting a business was definitely higher in the past. I think now
more people are I think more people are entrepreneurial. It links me on to something else, actually. Instagram bios. What's your Instagram bio say? How do you define yourself?
Mine says artist of life and visionary, and then something about helping people build a better relationship. I think with social media or their devices, it tends to change sometimes, but I like artist of life, because when what is life really, what is life, and what I like about, for instance, musicians or artists is exactly what you mentioned earlier, which is that they have, for a year, they focus on one project, or, they work on something or two, concurrent projects at the same time for a couple of years. And my professional life has always been like that. I've always been doing things, chapter at a time, some chapters overlapping. For instance, this PhD that I've been doing on and off for 7 years now, the research for it, and the thinking and the reading, while I was, a journalist and a tech founder and a VC fellow. And I like how all of that weaves together really nicely. It creates this really colorful, I guess, tapestry of my life and the experiences I've had. And so that's why I call myself an artist of life, because I feel like that describes it best. And now I really focus on this work on Instagram or social media and technology, and how to find a healthier relationship with it. And I think I'll be working on this year, probably next year, as long as I really enjoy it. And then, I don't know what life brings next. I want to keep those options open, in the sense that I really value exploration in life. And I want to be able, if something comes that I want to sink my teeth into, then I want to be able to explore that.
I love that. And that's also why I have an issue of personal branding. I've never, even though I see the use if you're an entrepreneur or a public figure, I think it just dumbs down life experience to like to say, oh, I'm just this. Like we're all many things. Even in our jobs, we're all many things. Particularly if you run a business, like I could have about 20 different titles in terms of what I call myself, but business owner or this teacher or movement coach or strength coach but I don't have any bio on my Instagram because I don't want to be labeled. I want, you can find out about me to go to my website. So there's a link to my website, but I've tried around having different bios, but if I'm really honest about it, I have like 8 different job titles. I sound like a dick. And if I just put one, then it's so reductionist that it's then, if I say just that I'm a fitness trainer, people have that in their mind, what that is. If I say a strength and conditioning coach, they have something else in mind. If I say a martial arts teacher or a yoga teacher, or if I talk about who I train, they think about that. It's that Kierkegaard thing. If you label me, you negate me. And it's like, it's just, that's why I like your one. That's cool. It's woolly enough. But then if you're just woolly,
you borrow it.
You have to be woolly. But then it's like, I've been a VC, I've been a founder, I'm doing a PhD. You've got credibility, so you can be a bit woolly in your name because you're also saying what you do. But if you're just like, hey, I'm an artist, but you haven't done any art, then it's a bit.
And look, the thing is also, this idea of personal branding is really, to me, it's very challenging because I'm a human first and a brand second. And I know in a way it's, to a certain extent, it's necessary to play this game or to be in the online space. And at the same time, I don't like putting a label on myself in that sense where it says coach or researcher or writer, because it's many different things at once, and it can also change, right? I want to give myself the liberty to, where maybe in the past I've changed a lot, and that might have confused people also. I mean, also me. Sometimes it's interesting the roads that life leads you down. But well, what if I call myself, let's see, I don't know, tech critic right now, and I do that for a little while, and then I realized actually the practical aspect of my work is leading me to doing corporate workshops on how people can form better, communication habits in a company. Then, well, I'm not a tech critic anymore. And I want to have enough flexibility to be able to give space to the work I'm doing with that. And also, I don't want to call myself a coach and all these things, because it's so, I don't know. I feel maybe I'm too irreverent for that. I like having it.
I think any words you use, there's connotations behind every single word.
Yeah.
And every job title, whatever you may be, like people go, oh, a salesman, a coach, a model, or an actor, musician. People have ideas a preconceived idea what that is. And it's, again, it's like it dumbs down who you are. So I think, I quite like just not having a bio and like.
That's what I do.
But then I do have a website with my name on it, so people can find. So it's not like I'm there yet, but my one little bit of playfulness, I suppose.
Yeah, and we need that, because after all these years of watching businesses online and being in the online space in one way or another, or figuring out how to do it for myself, I like a little bit of levity, because work can be serious for sure. And I feel, that the work I'm doing is serious in the sense that I care about the people it reaches, and I want them to feel good or better. But we don't have to take ourselves so serious all the time. And I think, I don't know, I just don't want to. Not all.
Life is far too important to take seriously, right? So I'm with you on that. That's an Alan Watts quote. All right, brilliant. So how can people? How do you help people at the moment? If people want to, because you help people, don't you, with their relationship?
I do. Yeah, I do.
Do you do that in a one-on-one coaching manner, or?
So I like helping entrepreneurs with finding a mindful social media strategy. I do that one-on-one. Sort of open-ended. If you go into it and you decide you want to go off social media, we can also work on that. I don't feel like I want to push anyone in a certain direction, but if you realize that, because as an entrepreneur, it's actually really challenging when you're on social media, because you are a consumer and because you're scrolling and ingesting content, and at the same time you are actually there for business purpose, and keeping those two roles separate, I feel like, is really important and actually helps you a lot. So I help people, refine their roles, and then we look at technical tools or strategies you can use. I'm really big on automating DM responses. I know it feels maybe a little naughty, but not everyone who has, a very baseline question about your offers needs your personal attention, especially not, once the scaling fairy has been around and all of a sudden
I think if your Instagram is a very clear product and it's and it's part of your funnel, that makes sense. If it's a personal Instagram, then I don't think it makes sense. But
and again, it depends on the person I'm working with, because my biggest gripe with social media marketing is that there's, often there are these recipes out there, and recipes can work to a certain extent, but then it always depends on your life situation or the situation in your business or how you use the channels. So I don't like giving out formulaic recipes because no businesses alike. Yours and mine aren't alike. So that's that. And then I have to. Well, when is this airing?
In 2 weeks.
Okay, perfect. Because I'm working on 2 courses / guides on how people can coach themselves through establishing a more healthy relationship with social media. So it comes with, some background information like what we talked about, and then a series of questions, tools, technical information.
So is this like a course people pay for, or?
Yeah, it's basically, at this point, it will probably be more like a workbook type of course they can download. I'm in the finishing stages of it.
That's exciting.
And you can either work through it, through a process of about 6 to 7 weeks, or if you're really just like, I need to fix this now, then it's probably an afternoon on a weekend that you might want to take and just go through the different steps and do it.
So they'll be out by the time this podcast airs, will they?
Yes.
Great. So how do how do people get hold of them? Where do they need to go?
You can go to my website, which is www.johanna.johannarenOth.com, and you will find all information there. And you can also sign up to my newsletter, because I'm very not so active on social media, and I love writing my newsletter, and I'm really big on, to be honest, on newsletter marketing.
Yeah, I read 3 of your blogs today actually, and I signed up to your newsletter. You were really
good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
There you are.
Thanks so much.
I'm looking for. How often do you send your newsletters? Are they monthly or?
No, about I have a public, sort of general newsletter, where, last week I sent a book tip. It all of it is about technology in our lives, and then also the question of what makes a good life as an extension of that. And I send that about once a week, and I'm working on a more, subscriber-based sort of mini podcast where I go a bit deeper on these things, and
great,
people tangible tools that you can sign up for. Also, probably in the next 1 or 2 weeks that's out. So
brilliant.
Really,
I'm so really pleased excited. I found you.
Well, I'm beyond happy we had this conversation. This is so fun. And to be honest, the dream is to be paid for talking, thinking, and philosophizing about life. So I feel very close to it now. And reading.
Yeah. Oh, final question, just out of interest. What did you do for your degree? First degree. Do you have a bachelor and do you have a master's degree? Do you? Or
yeah. I have a bachelor's in political science and communication science, and because I was a bit insane, I tried to do and get a second degree in economics at the same time, but I never finished that. So I have maybe a minor in economics, sort of the equivalent of my understanding, and a master's in political science and an MBA.
Far too qualified to talk to me.
Yeah. Like there's also a difference between paper-based knowledge and real-life knowledge. And I've had to learn over the past years that paper knowledge is great, but then you also have to apply that knowledge. And that's what I try to do.
My first degree was business, and I learned more being self-employed in the first week about real business, about that's why cash flow is important. That's forecasting. You understand that more than doing a whole 4 years of theory. Actually, I did a master's in political philosophy. Actually, I don't think I told you this.
Oh no, you have not.
But,
how fun!
I bailed in that. I did it was a 3-year course, and I bailed after 2.5 years because my final essay was on philosophy of identity, and which I find fascinating because I'm into that kind of stuff. But it's like, 25,000 word essay, and I dedicated like basically like 5 months off my coaching work to actually get it done. And I was kind of like 4 weeks in, and then had a breakup with a girlfriend. And for some reason, I was doing a little bit of kickboxing at the time, like as a hobby. And because I'm quite extreme, I realized that I was actually learning more from my little kickboxing lessons about myself, because I'd never been punched in the face before. And when you're learning how to fight, you get punched in the face, and you learn about stuff. You learn about, I'm afraid of, you often, like, we fear things, and you learn about yourself when you're in a primal place like that. And I actually was finding I was learning more in my lessons with this kind of pro Thai boxer, getting beaten up essentially, and learning about the nuance of martial arts, than I was reading all the shit I had to read, for my dissertation. So I bailed and I moved to Thailand and decided to become a full-time fighter. So because I should have really, one of my regrets is I should have finished that, because I have many regrets in life, but I kind of wished I finished my master's, because now it's just a post-grad diploma. It'd be nicer to say a master's degree. And if I just spent 4 more months writing it, I could have had that. Not that I need it, because I'm a fitness instructor. I don't need any of these degrees. They're just hobbies. But I resonate with your kind of business and philosophical background. I get that. And, I think it's important to educate ourselves in paper as well as real life. I think, look, my job is as a coach, and I think to really, when people hire me, I think I can only help them if, one, I understand the technical side behind that, and a lot of that is actually by reading studies, and actually understanding the science. Also, by having experience with other people, that gives me empathy, and it gives me understanding of the nuance, and also by living it myself. So if I want to teach someone how to run a marathon, I want to know what it's like to run a marathon, because then I know what it really feels like. Again, it's easy to have empathy, because as a coach, it's always this balance between empathy and leadership. You kind of need both of them to be a good coach. So no, there's nothing wrong with you having all these degrees. I love it. I'm very impressed.
For me, it was definitely the right path, because I've always had a very voracious mind, and that mind wanted to be fed. And at the same time, as you were saying, a week out of business school, all of a sudden you realize the practical implications of what you've been studying. And for me, I think with this work especially, I like that I can bridge both. I'm reading and writing right now. I'm reading and writing a lot for the PhD because I really, after reading, writing, and thinking for a really long time, I need to submit it. And it's that last stage where it's just sit down and do it. And at the same time, or sit down and finish it. And at the same time, just having the paper knowledge, the paper-based knowledge. Well, what good does it do if I churn out one more, PhD project that's going to be sitting in the university library without any practical implications? I didn't want that, because I can tell every time somebody learns that I'm doing this PhD, they're so excited to talk to me about it. And they always, like, as I was saying earlier, they have all these concerns and challenges around it. So why not figure out a way, or why not talk about it in a more public way, and really, break this down in chunks that people can actually digest them, and especially if they're non-technical people, if they don't have a tech background, or they could care less about the tech industry, why not make that more digestible, and then give them, to the extent of my possibilities, tools, questions, reflection prompts, whatever it is, so they can live a healthier life. Because I thought it was interesting that you reached out to me as somebody in the wellness industry, because I've been wondering to what extent we really need to consider digital health as part of our overall health and well-being, or digital wellness. And I think right now the industry is slipping on that a little bit, because the podcasts I'm hearing and the things I'm reading is a lot about, blue blocking glasses and screen time and things like that. But it goes a lot deeper, especially, with everything we've talked about. When you scroll and you feel bad about it, then, but what can you do? What are you going to do about it? So if someone's consciously anxious or constantly anxious, what role does their device use play into that? And what can you do to help them in this aspect of their lives to maybe bring it down a little bit, so they feel a little better already, right? Because scrolling is not a necessity of life, but being in life is a necessity of life. So I love that I get to do that this way now. And I've never had it in my career where both parts of my brain really got to weave together. That, ooh, this is an interesting idea, and ooh, I want to try that. So I'm very happy.
What's your do you have like a vision for your business, or like a big goal?
You know what? Yeah. Because I see that we're on the cusp of a new chapter in the history of the internet with the metaverse or Web3. We're really at the tide is turning, and we don't know yet where we're going. But what these past 15 to 20 years, especially of social media and smartphones, have taught me, or have shown me personally, is technology. And you as someone as a philosophy background, it's also the question, is technology really neutral, or does it have an agency of its own? Is it bad or good, or what's going on with it? But that aside, if we don't learn how to deal with this now, and how to establish a more empowered and more conscious relationship with this, I don't know what's going to happen once we enter the metaverse, or scenarios where the incentive is very much there to be online even more, to have an avatar online that's even more fleshed out, that has more information about us, or where we really present ourselves online in this new type of category we don't know yet, or when we really follow Zuckerberg's vision into the metaverse.
Technology isn't really the solution, just like you mentioned. I think on an Instagram post recently, actually. It's not, we don't need more technology, we need to sort of take a step back and think about it first.
And I don't know necessarily whether, because the companies and the finance behind it, I was in a VC program for a while. There's a big appetite and hunger for advancement right now. So my vision is, the more people I get to interact with, and the more people who, from the things I share, get a spark of inspiration, or a spark of, oh, I need to do something about this, and create a relationship with their technology, or the technology in their lives, where they feel more at peace, more empowered, and they're a bit more clear about why, I love vacuuming robots. Isn't that awesome? Like, that is a great piece of technology. And just questioning how we use technology and how we want it to help us, I think is really important. And the more people who get to that point where they have a more empowered relationship with their technology, the happier I am, because the more it enhances their quality of life also. Because when the tech in your life is bad, you will notice it, because you will be depressed, anxious, you might find it hard to concentrate, all the things we talked about. But when the tech in your life is good, well, maybe you can work less hours a week because you have it all set on automate. I mean, I know I'm painting a very simplistic image, but the core of it, I still stand behind. And that, the more people who are happy with their tech, the better. And who are chill and not anxious. Awesome.
Thus concluding your TED Talk. Thank you.
Yes.
Love it. Perfect note to end. Thank you so much, Johanna. Really enjoyed learning from you today, and hopefully we can talk again for some reason. I'll try and find an excuse where we can talk again.
I would love that. You are such a wonderful person to talk to. I told you last week when we had our pre-conversation for this interview that you're such a great conversationalist, and it's very relaxing to be on your podcast, which is so nice.
Very kind of you. I think the trick is I only bring on guests who people actually want to talk to. And this isn't, and this podcast isn't my main business. If my own, so it's purely for. We have thousands of people who listen in, which is nice because it's linked to one of our products, our Methodology X product. So I know there's an audience there, but I know if I'm not intrigued, fascinated, entertained, then what chance other people are. So I'm only going by what interests me. It's very selfish, but it's a good filter. Like if it interests me, then I'm guessing it'll interest other people. And then it means it's authentic in terms of the questions I'm asking. I don't need to make notes. I can just talk to you. So you make it, you're a lovely guest. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Well, take care. And everyone listening in, please check out Johanna Renoth.com.
That works, yeah.
I just butchered your name. We got on so well.
No, well, that's the international version.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the MX Podcast. All feedback, reviews, and social shares are very much appreciated. To find out more about the Methodology X Online Members Club, our award-winning MX Group fitness classes, or to join our global family of MX instructors, please visit danrobertsgroup.com.